am extremely happy to report that I had another amazing reading month in March, and I can't wait to tell you about the books that I read this month. One of my reading goals for 2025 was to write and share more thoughtful book reviews, so I'm going to continue doing that. I've been doing that in my past wrap-ups, and it's been really fun for me. So the first book that I want to share my review for is The Orange, right? The Orange? The Orange and Other Poems by Wendy Cope, which I really enjoyed. So here's my review. This was my first time reading a collection of poems by Wendy Cope, and it was an absolute treat. Her clever wit made me genuinely laugh out loud several times, which for me, no poetry collection has ever done before. Wendy Cope narrates the audiobook herself and gives wonderful insights into her inspiration and thoughts on many of the poems. And that's something that I really enjoyed, so I listened to the audio version, and I really loved hearing from Wendy Cope herself because I've never read any of her other poetry collections or any of her poems before, and I saw The Orange and Other Poems, the collection, circulating around, and I was interested by it. And I decided to pick it up on a whim, and I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that I did. Such a wonderful way to start the month. The next book that I read was absolutely incredible, and I will never not think about it. And it is the book that my book club members chose to read for my book club, the Well Read Book Club, where every month we read from a different genre, and then I pick 4 books from that genre, and everyone votes on which one they want to read. And the book that was chosen for March for sci-fi was Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. Oh my gosh, this has been on my TBR for so long, and I'm so glad that I finally read it because it was truly life-changing and devastating and beautiful and so powerful. This is one of the most heartbreaking and important stories I've ever had the pleasure of reading. If every single person on earth read this book, I truly believe we would be living in a much more accepting and kind world. The main character, Charlie Gordon, shows the reader the cost of intelligence. Through his experiences, we see the cruelty that comes with being seen as less than or inferior. On the flip side, we also see the loneliness and frustration that comes with a heightened awareness of humanity. Knowledge is a blessing and a curse for Charlie, but is it worth bearing such a gift, such a burden? This is a story I will not soon forget. And oh my gosh, it's so true. I really feel like everyone on earth needs to read this book. I felt like I learned so much from Charlie's experience, and he was such a lovable character, and there were so many times where I just wanted to give him a hug and be a friend to him, and it's just an incredibly beautiful story, and if you haven't read it, you definitely need to. I feel like it's one of those books where it's just like required reading for all people ever. The next book that I started and finished was Kitchen by Banani Yoshimoto. This is 2 novellas, or I guess it's like a novella and a short story, because the first novella is Kitchen, and then the second short story in this collection is called Moonlight Shadow. These stories, Kitchen and Moonlight Shadow, are stunning meditations on friendship, family, love, and grief. This was my first Banani Yoshimoto novel, and I was completely swept off of my feet by her gorgeous writing. I wasn't planning on annotating while I read, but I couldn't help but underline, circle, and star almost every page. As someone who has experienced grief, I found great comfort and truth in these stories. Losing someone you love is one of the most difficult and painful things a person can go through. It is a fact of life. Another fact of life is that we don't always have to go through that pain alone. Comfort can be found in the people who have not left us, or the happy memories that we will never forget, or in the books we read. Something that will never tarnish is the truth that books heal us. And I feel like this is a book that I can see really helping people cope and heal with their own grief, and it's just such an important story, and I loved her writing. So gorgeous, and just the descriptions are stunning, and it really just swept me off of my feet, so I highly recommend picking up Banani Yoshimoto's Kitchen. I really want to read more from her, so if you've read any of her other works, I would love to know if you recommend any of them in particular, and what you think of this one. I just really thought it was so beautiful. The next book I read, I listened to as an audiobook, and that was Evenings and Weekends by Oisin McKenna. And I really enjoyed the audiobook. The narrator did a great job, but I unfortunately just really didn't resonate with the story, and I didn't really jive with the characters. When I don't love a book, I have a hard time explaining why. It touches on topics of sexuality and acceptance and relationships and parental relationships, sibling relationships. I think I'm going to save my favorite for last. So anyway, this isn't the last one. This isn't my favorite, unfortunately. And that is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I have very conflicting feelings about this book. I said, feeling very undecided about my thoughts on this book. There were many aspects that I enjoyed, such as how the setting played a key role in how the characters lived their lives, as well as how Thomas Mann manipulated time in the sanatorium to almost move differently from the rest of the world. Overall, I sadly had a hard time staying engaged and connected to the story. With that being said, I think this book has a special brilliance, which is why it's such an important classic. And we read this book for the Game of Tomes book club, which it was our first book for January, February, and March, and now we're reading East of Eden, and I'm so excited about that one. But yeah, so I really liked a lot of aspects about this book, but I felt like there were a lot of moments where I was just kind of getting lost in many of the long discussions, and I do appreciate so much of it, and I do see why it's such an important book, and I think that it's brilliantly constructed, and what Thomas Mann does, how he manipulates the characters and the setting. I just feel like I was kind of getting lost in a lot of the conversations. This book is very meditative, it's very thoughtful and thought-provoking, but at a certain point, I was just getting lost, I think, and I enjoyed quite a bit of the beginning, and then as I got further on, I just was like getting less and less engaged, but I really do think that it's a brilliant book, and I can see why it's a classic, and I definitely think that it's worth reading. But I would love to know what you think of this. If you have joined us for the Game of Tomes book club, I would love to know what you think, and if you feel the same way as me, or if you loved it, I would love to know why you loved it, so feel free to share all your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear. But yeah, those are my thoughts on The Magic Mountain. Okay, I have saved the best and my favorites for last, and those are the 3 books that I read that are in a quartet. If you've been around my channel recently, you know what the books are. They are the Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante. I read the first book, My Brilliant Friend, in February, and so I finished the next 3 books in the series in March, and oh my goodness, I haven't reviewed these yet because I don't even know what to say about them, because I think they're all exquisitely gorgeous, and I don't know how to put my thoughts into words. Let me start with My Brilliant Friend. So in the first book, we are following the childhood and adolescence of the 2 main characters, the narrator Elena and her best friend Lila. It's set in this very small neighborhood in Naples. The neighborhood is kind of its own world, and there's a lot of violence and brutality and drama, and it just felt very authentic, and the characters are so complex and multifaceted and real. They just felt so real. And we're following the 2 young girls as they grow up throughout the whole series. It's about their friendship and the things that happen to them, and it's stunning. This book made me want to throw it out of the window. Just what the characters were doing, and oh my gosh, this one made me genuinely so angry because I wanted to shake them and be like, why are you doing that? Like, oh my goodness. But it also felt very real. They're young girls, they're going through, hormones, and they're in their teens, and they're just trying to figure out all their emotions and everything. And this book felt a lot like Italian summer vibes, because a lot of it was set in the summer, obviously in Italy, and I love that kind of atmosphere. I love that type of setting, and it was just such a thrilling read because I just needed to know what happened next. I was getting even more invested in the characters' lives. But this one made me particularly angry, but I loved it. Like, I was so angry because I was so invested. So that's what I felt with the second one. And then the third book, it was really interesting because I felt like it took on a very different tone. and that tone reflected the different stage that the characters are in their lives, and they're older now. So this one is set in the late 1960s and 70s. The characters are in their 20s in the second one, but they're in their like late teens, early 20s. And so now we're going further in time and as they grow up, and so this one is set, like I said, in the 60s and 70s. We're also seeing the type of work that the characters are doing and how that greatly affects their lives. This book was also a little bit more political. We're getting more information on what's happening in Italy at the time and how the characters are responding to what's happening, and also more of the like violence and brutality, the turmoil of Italy at the time. It touches on a lot of topics of fascism and communism, and they have very, very interesting conversations about that and how all the characters have different roles in what's going on in Italy. And I just found it really fascinating, and seeing how the characters were growing up and the lives that they were leading, because we follow them as young girls. It's like you want to see what else happens to them because you're so invested in their lives. And this one was a bit difficult to read because the conditions that the characters are in are quite difficult at times, and because they feel so close to my heart, it was hard to read about, but also just so incredibly eloquently written, beautiful, gorgeous, and I really, really loved it. Then, the fourth book, oh my gosh, rip my heart out, why don't you? Jeez. So this is The Story of the Lost Child, and this one felt like a whole entire journey, because it was a whole journey. We are following the characters when they're in their like middle age and older. We're just continuing to follow their lives as they create, families, how their families grow up. And I don't want to say too much because obviously it's the last book. The beginning of this book, I was so frustrated with the narrator because I was like, why are you doing that? What, you know how this is going to end, yet you do it anyway. And it was just thrilling, but also very complicated as a reader, having that outside perspective of like, I know that this is going to crash and burn, and then it crashed and burned, and you were like, see, I told you. The ending and what happens to one of the characters, and I don't want to say too much, but I can't recommend The Neapolitan Quartet more. It's beautifully written, engrossing, and you'll get so invested and connected to the characters, and it really felt like I was living in the neighborhood with them. Like it felt like I was just one of the other people observing the characters' lives, because you are as a reader, but it really felt like I was in Italy, in Naples with them. These are also translated by Anne Goldstein. I just want to say a huge thank you to Anne Goldstein, because I am learning Italian, but at the moment my Italian is at a very low level. But I'm just very grateful that I'm able to read these in English, and then one day, imagine if I could read them in Italian. That would be a dream. So here are 5 of the 8 books that I read in March. I would love to know, like I said at the beginning of the video, what you read in March. If you've read any of the books that I have talked about and have recommended to you, I would love to know what you think of them. And if you have any recommendations for me based on the books that I have talked about, I would love to hear. I always love getting recommendations from you guys, of course. So anyway, I hope you are having a wonderful April so far, and I am sending you my very best wishes, and thank you so much for watching and being here and always being so kind and lovely, and I will see you again very soon in another video, and as always, happy reading.